A pair of coaches that both hit 300 wins at their respective institutions meet up in the Sweet 16, and I'd bet they trade about 200 of them for a big win on Thursday.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is a crossover edition of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Illini, which is Locked On Cougs Parker Angel, joined by Sonny V of the Orange Sonny V Illini. That's pretty well done, actually. I in my head I think of Sonny D with orange, but I'll go with Sonny V. I like it.
Welcome to my childhood. That's all I ever heard. Sonny D. No, but it is Sonny V. Parker, I'm a big fan of your work. I'm glad we get to do this. It's not often that Illinois and Houston cross paths. It seems every couple of years apparently in the NCAA tournament. So
yeah,
it's nice to be able to spend the next half hour with you.
I like the reference to that 2022 game. In that one, Houston was coming off. Yeah, Houston was also coming off of a Final Four the year before, and they met up in the round of 32 that year. Pretty controversial hanging on the rim call, but we're going to be hanging out here in this virtual studio talking about a path to victory and some big stories. But first, I want to ask about Houston's got Kingston. You guys have Keaton Wagner. Talk about the wild year that it has been with Illinois, because I feel like, look, Illinois is a good program, but this was a year that feels like it was an overachieving kind of moment in a lot of ways, right?
I mean, it can be said. Yeah, sure. Especially last year, we had an up and down year led by two freshmen who both went in the top 21 in the NBA draft with Kasparas Yakishonis and Will Riley. And this year was kind of not necessarily a complete rebuild like the year before was, where Brad literally replaced 10 guys on the roster. This year we got Tomislav Ivicic back, we got Kylan Boswell back, we got Ben Humrickhouse back, Jake Davis. We had a nice foundation coming back, but we weren't sure who was going to step up and be that superstar. And certainly nobody thought that the freshman that was ranked 150th in the country would end up stepping up and being that superstar. And I've said this on the show, I firmly believe this. Brad Underwood has this Illini program as one of the most consistent in the country over the last 6-7 years. And we've had some postseason success, but I truly do believe that this year is the best squad that Brad has ever had at Illinois. And I'm really excited to see how far he can take them.
Well, and I think in modern college basketball, it always centers around having both good vets and good underclassmen. And not to sit on Wagner for too long, but you mentioned he was not a top 25 recruit or anything crazy. And I'd assume it was before he had 46 on Purdue. But when did you know, this is a one and done kind of kid, he's real special?
You know, it's funny. You can ask Brad Underwood and Kylan Boswell. They were giving hints to this in the offseason. They were talking about how Brad in particular said that there would be no real drop-off from Kasparas Yakishonis and Will Riley last year. Normally, Illini fans, we're used to this. Brad just kind of mouths off and is full of hyperbole in the offseason just to create hype on his players. But you saw Keaton play almost immediately, and you saw a freshman who just plays at his own pace. He doesn't get sped up. A lot of freshmen nowadays, sometimes they just go a little too fast. Their legs are running a little too fast. Their brains aren't processing at the speed of college basketball. Keaton never really had that issue. Illinois started off the season okay. They've had one of the toughest non-conference schedules in the entire country. I believe they're about 7-3. And then we lost a game in Madison Square Garden to the UConn Huskies at the time. And then there was just kind of a switch. Brad Underwood and the staff saw the development of their freshman guard, and they kind of handed him the keys. And Illinois has been essentially rolling since then. And it's of course, everybody, I think nationally, got introduced to Keaton Wagner at Mackey Arena when he scored 46 points, which is the most a visitor has ever done in that arena. But Illini fans have just been watching. He's a special player. We've arguably, in my opinion, he just had the greatest freshman season that Illinois has ever had. And Illinois has had a lot of good talent come through that door.
Houston's obviously got its own freshmen, and I'm sure we'll hit them at some point. But Houston's played A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Koa Pete, Braden Burries, Darius Acuff, a ton of freshmen across the landscape this year, both in non-conference. They played Tennessee and Nate Ament in Vegas. A lot of big-time freshmen. What sticks out to me about Keaton is that, honestly, look, I mean this in the nicest way possible and really more as a compliment. he's not very athletic. Whereas like Koa-Pete is built like an ox, and DeBonsa is a freak of nature, and Darius Acuff's got 5 gears when most people have 4. Keaton's got none of that and is still a top 10 pick. That's crazy, right? That's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, and it's absolutely true. I think it's the reason why he was kind of overlooked by all these universities. I mean, keep in mind, Illinois and Minnesota were the only 2 teams or Power 4 teams to offer him a scholarship. When you look at him, he's skinny, he's scrawny, he's not fast. He hasn't dunked the ball one time all year long, and yet there's just that one skill. Oh, he just happens to be really good at basketball. He's very
wild.
Things. I joke around. The equivalent I make is he's kind of like Luka in the NBA, right? Luka's not going to outrun anybody. He's got barely any agility, but he knows how to play angles. He knows how to, get others in foul trouble. He knows how to set his teammates up to be in the right position. That's kind of the skill that Keaton Wagner has. He's not going to wow you on any sort of pro day or NBA combine, but when he's got the basketball in his hands, magic happens.
And you mentioned the teammates: Merkovic, Stojakovic, Ivisic, a bunch of itches.
By the way, shout out to Parker. He's gotten all the names right so far. I know my audience had watched a couple of previous episodes, and when they knew that I was going to do this crossover, they're like, "You got to teach them how to say these names." So far, Parker, you're doing good.
I'm not going to try and do either Ivasic's first name, but tell me about other guys to step up for this team throughout the year, right? Because I think that's part of it. Because Houston will typically play one guy really well and make you beat him with someone else, but Illinois is in the Sweet 16 because they got a lot of those other people too, right?
You nailed it, Parker. So that's why this team is so incredibly dangerous. In the first round against Penn, the other freshman, David Merkovic, had 29 points and 17 rebounds. And quite honestly, if Keaton Wagner wasn't the national story and if he wasn't on this team, I think the nation would know the name David Merkovic. He's really that talented. Then you also have guys like Andrei Stojakovic, who, if you're an older guy like me, you watched his father play in the NBA. But it's funny, Parker. Their games are completely the opposite. Andrei Stojakovic is not a guy necessarily you want shooting 3-point shots. He's a guy who can, once he gets the ball at the top of the key, he puts his head down and he attacks. And then you have Tomislav Visic, his brother Zvonimir Visic, who had arguably the highlight of March Madness so far against VCU with his dunk. You're talking about 2 guys who are 7'1", 7'2". We might as well bring it up now. These are 2 of the taller teams in college basketball. Illinois is the tallest team in all of college basketball. We've had lineups where we have the 7'2" center, 7'1" power forward, 6'10" small forward, and a 6'9" shooting guard, and a 6'6" point guard. I mean, when they go big, they can absolutely go really big, and that's kind of a reason the rebounding numbers are so solid, and other teams have trouble responding to that.
And Houston's a team that I think typically in Samson terms is a very strong rebounding team, and it's not always because they are tall. This year they've got some size. They really recruit to wingspan, and I heard Kellen say this at a clinic one time, but he's like, once we got 3 or 4 years into this thing, kind of pick who we were going after, they were taking the 6'9" guy with a gigantic wingspan over the 7-foot guy from an athleticism standpoint pretty much every time. And for the folks that, on the Illini side that haven't seen, JoJo Tugler is legitimately 6'7", 6'8", and legitimately has a 7.5-foot wingspan. He's like knees, hands past his knees, doesn't have to bend over to scratch him kind of guy. And it really does look different the way it plays out on the floor because they're just constantly flying around, tipping the ball out, and that kind of stuff. Rebounding seems like it's going to play a big role this season. Now, I'm sure we're going to talk at some point about the fact that Houston lost 3 games in a row this year, and that was kind of like the first time that's happened in a long time. I want to ask about why can't Illinois win a game decided by 4 or less points? Like, why are the close games? Because they've got a ton of talent. Give the ball to Wagner, get out of the way. Like what's the issue there?
Yeah, no, we're all trying to figure it out. It's not just that even. Like the Michigan State game, like Illinois lost 5 of their last 9 games coming into the national tournament. The Michigan State game, it was without Kylan Boswell, who was not playing. The Wisconsin game, again, Michigan State went into overtime. Wisconsin was without Kylan Boswell and without Andrei Stojakovic. That game went into overtime. Illinois really has an 8-man rotation, and Kylan Boswell missed almost a month in the middle of the season. So that 8-man turned into a 7-man. It's not like Brad incorporated anybody else into the rotation. Those guys were grinding. And then Andrei Stojakovic sprains his ankle against Michigan State. And so really we were just running with 6 guys for a while. And, it's one of the, I wish I had an answer for you. And trust me, Illini Nation, we wonder the same thing. It's what makes me most nervous because Illinois blew out Penn. Illinois blew out VCU. But we know that a team like Houston, that game's going to go right down to the final buzzer. And if there's 2 minutes left and it's a 1 or 2 possession game, Illinois has shown that they haven't been able to close it out in the past. So all of a sudden, Illini fans are going to be sitting at the edge of their seats trying to figure out whether they can close it out or not. Because if they do, it's going to be one of the first times all season long.
I want to talk about how to close this game out and how both these teams, I think, see paths to victory that are ironically, I don't think going to be that far apart. I think they want to do the same kind of thing. It's going to be which team can inflict it. Before we get to that, our buddies over at Mazda have something to say.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. All 4 number 1 seeds, UConn, UCLA, Texas, and South Carolina, have completely dominated the opening rounds of the NCAA tournament. UConn rolled with a 98-45 victory over Syracuse behind AZ Fudd, who had a 34-point explosion, while South Carolina has been led by Joyce Edwards coming off a 23-point game. UCLA leaned on Lauren Betts with a 35-point performance in an 87-68 win over Oklahoma State. And Texas advanced comfortably with a 40-point show from Madison Booker. And now we're headed to the Sweet 16. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel because the tournament is here. We're in Sweet 16, one of the best times of year. There's brackets, there's buzzer beaters, there's upsets. It's nonstop action from tip to final. Cut down. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. The best part is you can get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament. You mix up however you want. Game picks, futures, same game parlays, whatever you want for a potential bigger payout. Is perfect for the tournament because every day there's something new. Different matchups, different storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. It's FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. Parker A, Sonny V here talking about Houston and Illinois in the Sweet 16. I said before we went to the break there, Sonny, that I think that what's interesting here is that both teams want to rebound the ball well. Both teams want to play a relatively slow pace, and both teams want to make a decent number of threes. Now, Illinois does some of those things. I mean, they make more threes than anyone in America, it feels like. I don't think that's actually quite the stat. They're pretty high up there.
Feels like it.
Feels like it. And both teams play at pretty slow paces, but Houston's legitimately one of the slowest paces in America, right? That's part of the charm. And I guess my question is there something that Illinois wants to do that Houston doesn't want to do? And because I actually see these two teams as like both wanting to do the same kind of thing in this game.
Well, I mean, I've watched a couple Houston games over the past couple of days, and I see how you guys really attack the ball handler. And I think in some ways, Illinois' offense is, I don't know if you agree with me or not, Parker. I don't know how much Illini basketball you've watched, but I really do think that both of these teams are just awful matchups for the other. In the sense where Houston is obviously a super physical team. They're scrappy. They're going to punch you in the face and waiting to see how you react. But from what I've gathered from Houston's defense, like Illinois has no problem not holding on to the ball. They will pass the ball around over and over again until they find the open guy to take the open shot. Illinois, for most of the season, was the number one team in offensive efficiency, according to Ken Pom, not just in the country, but in history of Ken Pom being around. And that's because they're patient. Again, they don't fast break. They're not really a team that gets transition points. They're very patient. They'll pass the ball around. They'll run plays until they can find the right guy in the right spot. And then if they happen to miss that shot, they're one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the country because of their size. You'll see it, Parker, once an Illini player throws up a shot, there's going to be 4 guys crashing the boards to get an offensive rebound. It's just the style, the culture that Brad and Tyler Underwood over there have built. So really for me, it's going to come down to, does Houston make their mid-range shots? Because Illinois will give them to you. Or will Illinois make their 3-point shots? Because if the 3-point shots fall, then it's hard to beat Illinois to begin with.
Well, and one thing I think is Houston. So Houston has won a handful of games this year where they have not won the rebounding battle, and so I would say, well, it's a calling card of Samson. This year's team has been able to overcome it a couple times, frankly, right? But they pretty consistently need to win the turnover battle. And I don't mean this negatively, Sonny. I don't know that that's necessarily about Illinois turning Houston over a lot as much as it's like Houston's gonna have to turn over Illinois a lot. And if I'm being concerned, I'm worried about like the size making like skip passes an easier thing and that kind of a deal. I will say, when I'd only seen about 20 minutes of Illinois basketball,
sure.
Sunday morning after watching 20 minutes of the game, the second half of their game against VCU, I was like, oh, we're going to know who won this game in the first 5 minutes because someone's going to punch someone in the mouth, and it's just going to be who throws that haymaker, right? Like, who's got it that day. In a 7-game series, it's a whole different thing, but in a 1-game sample, if Illinois is hot, we got problems. If Houston's knocking down 50% of the mid-range against that drop coverage with those big guys, but they're pretty far dropped, like I think Illinois has problems. And that, I still think some of that holds, but the turnovers were really important as far as I can tell. Illinois doesn't seem to turn it over a whole lot.
No.
Do you think it's because of their size, or is it? I mean, they also play a slow pace. They're not going to have not a whole lot of possessions to turn it over on.
Brad Underwood has talked about all season long, the strategy that he's building with this Illinois team is to limit variance as much as possible. Essentially, what they try to do is, more often than not, they feel like they're the more talented basketball team on the court on any given day. And the only way the underdog really wins is if you give them opportunities. If you make more aggressive plays, it can lead to turnovers and free points for the opposition. If you take a look, they don't foul anybody either. They're taught and they're coached not to foul, to give up free points to the opposition as well. It's something that we've seen all season long. I'll be honest, Parker, the Houston Cougar fans, you guys are going to get frustrated more often than not because you're going to wonder when you look at the box score at halftime why Illinois only has 2 or 3 fouls at the time. This happens I deal with it with every opposing fan base at this point. That's what they're coached to do. There's no other way to put it. They don't foul. They try to limit their turnovers because they think that when it comes down to it in a game of basketball, they're going to be better than you, and they just want it to be proven on the court and not by a wild bounce here or there.
Well, and the free throw is interesting too because you'd think and this is more schematic, you'd think playing a deep drop would mean you're giving up a bunch of fouls to the rim because your center is near the rim, and that's leading to contact there if you drive the basketball, whatever. They're very good at playing vertical down there. And so I think that's kind of on KenPom right now. I have up that they are 365th in free throws allowed. I think that is dead last. I think that, and
I wasn't lying.
and I think that speaks to, frankly, Houston's going to need to make those mid-range jump shots. I think Illinois is very content giving up those mid-range jump shots. And Kingston Flemings is really good in that area. Emmanuel Sharp is really good in that area. I think that there's a chance they do it. I'm frankly more interested to see what happens if, let's say, they hit a few of those in the first half. Does Underwood change anything knowing this is a win or go home situation? Like this isn't January, this is March. And you can't just say, hey, one our night. Like you've got to figure something out. Because then you start playing the chess game about who's moving what pieces where, right? And both these teams are very comfortable in what they do, but they also have things that they just do. And if you have to change that, right? Something that you're not like, that's a problem.
You're 100% right. And if you're talking about, if I had to pull what the number one fear of Illini fans is, it's like we have flashbacks of just 2 years ago against UConn, where the game plan was to attack Donovan Clingan over and over again in the Elite Eight. It just didn't work but Brad didn't have a backup plan. And so it's one of those where, we can talk about Kingston for a second. If there's been one Achilles heel on this Illini basketball team, it's been small, quick guards. Nick Boyd has scored over 30 points. Bruce Thornton has scored over 30 points. Donovan Dent had a really big game against them. Braden Smith scored over 30 points against them. That's a weakness of this Illini basketball team. And quite honestly, Kingston Fleming might be better than all of those guys. So I truly do feel like Kingston could be in line for a huge game. And I'm not even talking about over his average of 16 or whatever. I'm talking about he can go off for 30 plus. But what Illinois tries to do is make sure they don't think one guy can beat you. And so even if they let Kingston get his points, either they're going to have to adjust or they're going to really focus on making sure it's just Kingston making his shots. But again, this Houston team with the defense and the style that you guys play, you don't need much room on the offensive end. If a guy like Kingston can go off and Illinois is not making their 3-point shots and you guys are more physical and you guys got more of those floor burns, then, this could be a game where the Cougars advance.
And I feel like you mentioned Kingston being able to go off for 30 or whatever. One of the connections between these two teams is that both Keaton Wagner and Kingston Fleming were two of the three freshmen, when you throw in AJ DeBonta, to break 40 on the same day. It was the first time that ever happened where three freshmen did that on the same day.
You remember that.
I think people kind of forget outside of Houston actually lost the game where Kingston scored 42. And Tech was kind of where you're at, where they were like, hey, that dude's hot today. Let's make sure no one else scores. He ain't scoring 80, right? And that was the way that day went. I do kind of think that he's learned. I mean, that was January and he's a freshman. I think he's learned a lot about like, hey, you don't have to take every single one of those because they kind of want you to take some of them. But we'll see how it plays out. I think there's other big stories here, though, whether it is the two freshmen, it is the coaching matchup, it is a rematch of a really interesting and unique game from a couple years ago, frankly. Big 12, Big 10. There's a lot of angles playing this, and I kind of want to broaden this out in a second. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Robinhood, because you got to wonder, what if sports traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell positions live all game long. Just use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator play-by-play. You decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps. Trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission, merchant, and swap firm. Today's show is also brought to you by over at Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Speaking of which, it sounds like North Carolina's a sponsored job out there. They need some new coaching staff apparently. But if you are in a place that has workplace chaos, deadlines that come, you got that position like head coach of the Tar Heels, they just got to fill. Pressure's on. You need the right hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's that does it all, though. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners to the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Hit Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hire? That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Parker A, Sunny V, couple teams here in the Sweet 16. And really, like, I think in a lot of ways, we kind of alluded to it, teams that want to do similar things that are also, I think, interestingly, in very different conferences. One big storyline I want to ask your opinion about has been the Big 12 took a couple of injuries, right, with JT Toppin and Richie Saunders kind of hurting the ceiling for Texas Tech and BYU. I still don't know that BYU even reached their second ceiling after that, but that's separate. But both of these two conferences have kind of been at the top of the sport for a while now.
Sure.
The Big 12 added Houston, added Arizona, and kind of felt like they were moving up their way, the ladder, so to speak. Kansas has kind of taken a step backwards, though, right? The Big 10 stays steady. And while I have my thoughts about adding USC and UCLA and Oregon and all that from a basketball perspective, it certainly has always had the blue bloods of the North, right? And so, look, our own region is 3 Big Ten schools in Houston.
Yeah. I saw us versus Farm Boys.
Yeah, that was my thumbnail. I got some flack for that, actually. My thumbnail on Monday was us versus the Farm Boys. And the funny thing is in this game, it's actually us versus the Eastern Europeans and a kid named Keaton. But
the Balkans.
The Balkans. So what, having covered Illinois in this conference and looking out at the rest of the world, where do you see this comparison right now? Does this game, I mean, Houston finished second in the Big 12. Illinois is also at the top, but not the top of the Big 10 in the season. Do you see this as being some sort of an indictment of carryover? Is it really just, if it's a close game, these are two teams that were at the top? I mean, the top is the top is the top, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to watch this game. I don't think there's any doubt that this is the best game of this next round. I was at the Big Ten tournament at the United Center just last week, and I got to see a lot of these Big Ten teams up close. And this conference, especially on the top side, is just very deep with talent. Michigan, in my opinion, is the best team in the country, but even Wisconsin looked good, and then they lose to a team like High Point. I've said this on my show. Illinois is one of those teams that I think is truly grateful to just get out of the gauntlet of playing the Big Ten each and every day. They're a team that's going to be really hard to game plan against because they don't necessarily run any sets. Everything they do is kind of reactionary. They see what the defense offers them, and they react to it. And that's, if you're a new assistant coach and you only have 4 days to game plan against that, it's kind of tough. Whereas the Big Ten is full of really some of the top level head coaches and coaching staff, and you're looking at this tape each and every day. But Houston's a team that just went to the national championship last year. Like they've got I'm sure that you just want to get over that edge and win it all this year. I'm actually curious, I know we're almost running out of time. Like, how would you compare this year's Houston team to last year's team? Because last year's team was one of the more grittier basketball teams I've seen in a while. And I think this Houston's still Houston, or at least this year's version, but I do feel like it's not quite as exaggerated as last year's team was. Is that fair?
Yeah, the way I've talked about this year has been, I actually weirdly think that a couple of lottery picks in Kingston Flemings and Chris Sinak, the other freshman, power forward, 6'10", 6'11", long wingspan. He can pop and shoot threes some too. I think that they raised the ceiling of this team actually really high. The biggest difference, though, Sonny, is that the floor is so much lower. Last year, you had 6-year guy, Jawan Roberts, at power forward, and your other guard was LJ Cryer, who was an All-American and had been a national champion at Baylor years prior. And so you kind of had this like foundation of like, hey, like when it gets tough, you got guys that can just do it on the fly. This year, you have a freshman point guard running it. And you have, Sinak got beat up by JT Toppin a couple times this year, right? And stuff like that. And so you do kind of wonder if the floor being lower means that the results are different. I will say that I also felt like they got, certainly in the first 2 rounds, they had to play a top 10 in Kimpom Gonzaga as their 8 seed last year when they were a 1 seed. And Illinois is a much different test than their first 2 games this year were. And I feel like they almost have, to this point, had an easier draw they did to the Sweet 16 a year ago. Last year, they beat Purdue at the buzzer, wasn't quite the buzzer, but in the game, right, famously. So it sets up for a similar kind of path in that way. Last year's team was really good, and there's a award where they don't beat Duke. There's also a award where they beat Florida because they were 60 seconds either direction for winning that one, right? So that's the way the cookie crumbles. Brad Underwood, right, 300 wins, Illinois. I don't mean to say anyone would ever leave Illinois for any of these other jobs, but it does feel like there's a lot of talk about other blue blood jobs open. And I don't, you once upon a time lost Bill Self to Kansas, right? Yeah. I guess that does happen. Underwood's been there a minute, had some success. Is this kind of a big year for him in his time in Illinois? He's 7 or 8 years in. He's got a lottery pick in the draft. He's got a really good team. Or is it just he's a mainstay? He's going to be there a long time at this point.
This is one of those questions that Illini fans debate, even on my show. 3 or 4 times a week, I can talk about something completely unrelated, and my comment section just becomes either fire Brad Underwood or extend Brad Underwood. It's one of those where I think he's alleviated a lot of the pressure by making it to the second weekend this year. That was something he'd only done once previously, but now you can look at it. He's done it twice in the last 3 years. Obviously, I think this is the most talented team that they have, and I do think that this team's capable of making a run, not just to the Sweet 16, but potentially to the Final Four. And when this team gets hot, I think this team can beat anybody. But they've got a big test, obviously, on Thursday night. Brad's one of those guys who, as we're recording, essentially the news of Hubert Davis being separated from UNC is happening. And we just heard about Bill Self, who you just mentioned. He's rumored to possibly not wanting to come back next year. Can you imagine if Kansas and UNC jobs are open in the single offseason? That could cause a huge earthquake when it comes to the head coaches around the country. But Brad's kind of at that age where he's a little on the older side now. And, I will say, if there's one thing that I feel confident in saying, is Illinois has, in my opinion, the best athletic director in the entire country in Josh Whitman. He's done such a fantastic job with men's basketball, women's basketball, our college football team. We're the only school in the last 2 years to have won your first round games and a bowl game for 2 years. And I just think that Brad has such a good relationship with Josh that he's probably at the point in his career where he wants to see this through, because he knows he's got the backing. And essentially, I should have just said this from the start, he's got a lifetime contract. He basically can't leave for another college job. So it's a long-winded way of saying he's not going anywhere.
Well, and that's interesting because you mentioned all the openings. There's whispers that Samson's done soon. And
I wanted to bring that up, actually. So, again, what's going on with this? Is Calvin, has he hinted towards this? And if he does, do you know which direction that they might go in?
So I think it's a lot of hearsay. I will say one big deal is, so he is 70. I should point out he is 70. His son is the associate head coach and head coach in waiting, his lead assistant, right? His daughter runs all the media. His daughter's in charge of all the outward looking face of the program. His grandkids are waiting for him in the tunnel after games. It is a very unique setup, and that's a family affair. So he can still be grandpa in a way that I think is unlike what Bill Self gets to do, frankly, right? And stuff like that. I think that helps. I think he's got a lot of energy for a 70-year-old. I've seen him cuss guys up and down in ways like, whoa, if I'm moving like that at 70, I'm doing all right, right? Yeah. There was pressure, I think, in the sense that Kellen, his son, is the head coach in waiting, and there are other places that want to hire Kellen. and one big one was Oklahoma was rumored to have wanted to throw an offer at him, and then they retained Mosier. They announced they were retaining Mosier, which was a weird move, right? And it was like, okay, well, that means Kellen's not going there. That's check, because Kellen played for Samson at Oklahoma, right? That was an alma mater thing. And so I think that there's some pressure in that way. He is 70. He's won 800 games in his career, 300 at Houston. And look, full disclosure, he has denied it because it didn't happen. If they'd have won the title last year, I think he'd have hung it up then. It would just been too good a storybook ending. He is presently a finalist for Hall of Fame, and so he may get inducted in April or announced in April, whatever, right? But I think that would have been too big a storybook ending to not have gone out on that. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen this year. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen next year or whatever, right? But I only think that would have happened last year if they'd have won. I don't think it's otherwise a thing. If they win it this year, I might do it though that way. Who knows? But that's the way the cookie crumbles there. You got more Houston and Illinois talk coming out this week, I'm assuming. It's the topic du jour. It's the best Sweet 16 matchup of the bunch, and it's a lot of fun. Sonny, where can people from my end find you to talk about this game? Because I'm feeling like a lot of people like talking about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. On Thursday morning's episode, I'm going to highlight the Keaton Wagner versus Kingston Fleming's matchup. So you can find me over at Locked On Illini. You can find me in all the social medias at the Sonny V. I also produce Talk Illini, which is the On3 podcast for Illinois, and also cover collegiate athletics for USA Today. So I'm a pretty busy guy. Just find me at the Sonny V, and you can find all my work.
Of course. And for Illinois fans looking for more on this, obviously Locked On Cougars, just like Locked On Illini, wherever you find your podcasts. I'm at Painsworth512 on social media platforms. I will probably be firing off a few tweets about Hubert Davis and the North Carolina Tar Heels. I like talking college hoops, so find me on there if you want to talk some, or tell me how to pronounce someone's name, because I do that wrong all the time. It's not on purpose, I promise.
I will say, Parker, it's Wagler.
So
otherwise you did good. Otherwise you did great.
I've heard Wagler. I swear over the weekend I heard someone say Wagler or Vogler or something. I was like, I guess, is he German? Anyway, okay. Wagler.
Yeah. Wagler. Otherwise you nailed it.
Well, and to be fair, we're going to be hearing his name 82 times a year next year, so that's the way that goes.
You got
That's Sonny V. I'm Parker A. This has been a Locked On Crossover Edition. Thank you for tuning in and making us first listen of the day. Both proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.